So it's not just about the workplace. It's about how do you handle that stress in the whole picture of your life? Are you finding joy at work? Are you finding joy at home? Are you finding ways to get the things that make you happy? I spent hours and hours and hours helping this person so that their business would continue to succeed. And then when I did this, they stuck their head in the sand and didn't want to help.
I'd love to hear your opinion on this. That leadership equals you got to be busy all the time. Like good leadership looks like the leader, the business owner, the entrepreneur doing something 100% of the time. Business owners that own businesses, if they're the 90%, everything goes through them, they're the choke point in an organization, they don't own a business, they own a job. Hey everyone, John here. Welcome to the episode today. I'm excited today for you all because I have a special guest, Michelle Niemeyer, with me, and we're going to talk about burnout. What if burnout taught you the time management secret that changed your life? A lot of us new business owners, entrepreneurs out there, leaders, are struggling with not just our own time management, but now we're leading and influencing others, and we have this challenge to mentor and coach them on their time management strategies. So today, Michelle, I am very, very excited to introduce you to our audience, the Go Be Great community. And, the first question I really have for you is burnout can disguise itself as time management issue. But, many of our listeners, they're small business owners. And they continue to spin their wheels, right? So they're believing that they just need better planning, which at first, I was in that boat. I was like, I just need to go take a time management class though, right? But you've experienced this firsthand. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us your story and what are some early warning signs that leaders should look for? Right.
Well, I find it interesting that you said that you took a time management class because that's exactly what I did too. And the reason I created the Art of Bending Time was because of that. I knew that people like me who were hopefully early enough in this process not to get sick from it would learn that those are early signs of burnout. So what I felt in that early stage was that I was spinning my wheels. I was often distracted. I was not getting the same amount of work done in the same amount of time it used to take me. I was a lawyer for 33 years, and this happened to me when I was about 20 years into it. So for many, many years, I loved what I did. I was very successful. I was really, engaged and excited about it, and didn't think that working the really long hours and working weekends sometimes and working on Christmas Eve one year while my family ate dinner and exchanged gifts was going to ruin my life, right? I didn't think that. And then I hit a point where all of a sudden I was like, why did I choose this? I hate this. I feel detached. I feel like, I literally hit a point where I felt like every choice I had made in my life was wrong. And I had people sending their kids to me saying, my kid wants to be a lawyer. Will you talk to him or her? And I'd be like, why would you want them to do that? So I hit that point over a very long time. And my point about that is it didn't start as I hate being a lawyer or I don't want this career anymore. It started as I'm just not getting work done. I'm scattered. I'm not focused. I'm disengaged. And I actually, for a little while, thought maybe I had ADHD. And I never bothered to go to the level of getting tested for it, but that's what I thought was going on. Oh, maybe there's something like that going on. And, I'd finish a whole day and I'd realize I read the same paragraph 8 times before I got distracted by something else and walked away from the project, right? And that would happen. But the other thing was I started resenting the fact that I was giving up these personal things. During the course of my many years of law practice, my marriage fell apart. I was at the point where I got really burned out. I was now divorced. I was I didn't have kids. I wasn't doing the things that really, I thought I would do in my life. I had wanted to travel. I wasn't traveling. There were all these things that I was looking at it, going back to that person I might have been at like 18, 20 years old and going, what happened to her? Where did this go? And, one thing that's so important is our life is about a lot of different things. It's not just about building a business. It's not just about making a certain amount of money or buying the house or having the car or having the family or, it's all of it.
Hey everyone, a quick break in the episode today. Are you struggling to find and keep the right employees? You're not alone. High turnover drains time, money, and morale, leaving us frustrated, overwhelmed, and feeling like we have to settle for less. I understand how tough hiring can be because I've lived it. And with over 21 years of building high-performance teams, I know how to turn hiring challenges into lasting employee success. Through my proven lead framework, we're going to analyze your processes, design a personalized strategy, and implement solutions that create confident and long-term results. Don't let turnover hold you back. Choosing this program is that first step towards a thriving workplace. Enroll today at thejohnespinosa.com and build the team you deserve. Imagine a team that works seamlessly together or keep facing the same costly cycle of turnover. The choice is yours. Now back to our episode.
And when we get burned out, we stop feeling the joy in any of it. So it doesn't just affect you at work. I've seen the World Health Organization has defined burnout in a way that specifically isolates it to being about workplace stress. I don't believe that, because we are whole human beings. So it's not just about the workplace. It's about how do you handle that stress in the whole picture of your life. Are you finding joy at work? Are you finding joy at home? Are you finding ways to get the things that make you happy? And yes, workplace can be stressful. Yes, it can be hard, especially when you're an entrepreneur and you have a small business and you have a budget and you have to pay your bills. It's difficult. But that's a mindset thing. You can learn to manage that stress.
So explain to the audience, tell the audience, what were some early warning signs that you saw? And, maybe a couple strategies that you could share.
Okay, so those early warning signs for me were that sense of resentment. I started feeling like I was giving and wasn't getting anything back. And that didn't just exist about my clients and about my work. It also existed about volunteer work I was doing, where I was spending tons and tons of time to help other people's businesses and to help other people with their problems. And again, I felt like I wasn't getting anything back. I did a lot of work. I was a elected representative on a village council, which is part of Miami, but it's not really government. We were elected on the ballot, but we didn't have a budget. We didn't have offices. We worked as volunteers. And then we brought the public together to gather information about what people liked or didn't like or wanted or didn't want. And then we essentially acted like lobbyists to the city and county governments to make sure that our community was getting what mattered. And it was extremely time consuming. Sometimes it was also, as the era of social media increased, I was getting people who weren't very nice sometimes, commenting on things and whatever. And it became really burdensome and difficult. And I was looking at it and going, what am I doing? I spent hours and hours and hours helping this person so that their business would continue to succeed. And then when I did this, they stuck their head in the sand and didn't want to help, And so it wasn't just about work. But my point with this is you need to have clarity about what matters. This is really my first piece of advice to everybody is to be super clear on what matters for you. So what happened to me that was a problem was that I was diffusing my efforts into a broad realm of other people's important issues. And in the end, that stuff it mattered to me in a sense, but it didn't matter to me in my bigger picture. It didn't matter to me in the things that I hold dear in my heart. But it was, I wanted to do something for my community. I wanted to create a positive impact. And there are some things I accomplished that I'm very proud of and I'm really happy about. But there were other things that I put my time into that I look at it now and I'm like, what did I do that for? And if you have that clarity and you can kind of pull back, and it takes some thought. It takes, literally taking a moment. One of the things I think the biggest mistake we make as achievers, as builders and entrepreneurs and business owners is that we want to do, right? Our solution, our go-to solution to anything that isn't working out is to think we need to do more. And sometimes what we need to do is not do more. Often what we need to do is pull back and get a really solid understanding of what is it that matters? What matters in my business? Why am I doing this business? What about this business lights me up and makes me feel like I'm contributing to the world and I'm doing something important and I'm helping the clients I work with or the customers I work with? And if you can get really super clear on that, then you're not going to be in a position where 90% of your effort is going off into the ether, so to speak, and you're not really feeling the benefit of it. That's when you get burned out.
100%. And everybody take a minute, write this down. Now, this is an active listening podcast, Michelle. Everybody knows it would get out your journals because what Michelle just said is absolute gold. When we talk about this fact that we have to do more, I love what you said when business isn't going the way that we thought it was going to go. So we just put our head down and we work. And that fallacy, I think, is something, and I think also there's a myth out there, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, that leadership equals you got to be busy all the time. Like good leadership looks like the leader, the business owner, the entrepreneur doing something 100% of the time. Can you talk to a little bit about that myth and, relate it to your personal story and maybe some ways that we can overcome that thinking?
Yeah, I think the biggest one I sort of grew up with was the idea that a leader wouldn't have anybody do something they wouldn't do themselves or that they don't do themselves. So if the team is working until midnight, the leader's there working till midnight, etc. And to some degree, that's important. To some degree, it's team building. And to some degree, it gives, if you're working your team to midnight because something's that important, it probably matters to be there. But you shouldn't be there just because there's some rule, right? Or there's some idea that you're only a leader if you're there. And if you have 100 irons in the fire and one of those irons has something going on at midnight and you have to be someplace at 6 the next morning, why would you be there till midnight? But some people try to do everything. Yeah. One of the best things you can do as a leader is to choose people who are better than you are. I had a mentor when I was working in Washington, D.C. in my first law job, and he was someone who had gone to my law school who was involved in the Alumni Association, and he was the senior partner, founding partner of a firm across the street from where I worked. And we'd have lunch about once a week. And he said something to me that stuck with me, and it was, I want to hire such smart people that I'm the dumbest person in the room. And, that was really, he had built a team of phenomenal lawyers, and he trusted them to do great work, and he trusted them to carry the ball on their part of the game. And he had very little turnover, and a law firm that lasted and thrived for a very long time. He's retired now, and his firm still exists. And, but he was somebody who didn't try to take the ball from the other player at the end in the end zone, right? He didn't try to do all the work. How many burned out leaders do you know who are the ones who are saying, I can't trust anybody, I have to do that myself because, or nobody can get it done like me. And maybe they can't because they're doing it better, or maybe they can't because they have a different thought process and they come at it at a different angle. But if you don't give people the opportunity to be really great and to shine, you're losing their loyalty, you're losing their trust. If you don't trust them, they're not going to trust you. You're going to have more turnover. That's going to cause you to have to work harder, right? So if you build a great team around you and you consider that part of what you're doing as a leader, as a great business owner, you're going to be able to do less with way more. Not a little more, way more.
Yeah. So what would you say to the leader who has trust issues, has delegation issues, has that mentality that nobody can do it better than me? Mm-hmm. Walk us through that. What would you coach them on? How would you handle that situation?
Well, one thing I've seen with people like that, and I've worked with some people like that, and I've been the person like that, right? I was the person, and this led to me getting burned out, where I would join an organization, I would become the leader of the organization, and I did 90% of the work of the organization. And that doesn't work, ever. It doesn't work. The best organization I ever led and the most fun I ever had with something was when it was a volunteer thing I did where the city of Miami was getting a planning firm to decide what to do with the waterfront in this part of town that I lived in. This led to all the volunteer stuff. We had 5 people on a committee, 6 including me. We literally split up the work 6 ways and everybody had their own piece of it. And I never interfered with the other people's pieces of it. When that happened, it worked out beautifully because each person was doing the part that they were doing. Each person had a sense of ownership in the part that they were doing. We communicated together about it, came up with solutions, and it wasn't all on one person. But if you can't trust that, let's say you have a business, it started out as you doing some kind of service and it was only you, and now you've grown. And you're hiring people to come into your business and help provide that service. And ultimately, you want them to be independent like you were, able to do their piece of the business. Obviously, if you have expectations about how you want to provide that service. You want a certain kind of essentially branding in the community about what you do, how you do it, why you're better than other people at this service. Mm-hmm. You want to convey that to them. You need to have a way to express, this is our mission. This is our company's way of doing things. This is what we value as a group. And you need to hire people who agree with that. Right? I mean, you don't want to have a customer-focused business where your biggest value to the community is that you're the ones who actually care about the people who come in the door. You know their name, you listen to them, you help them connect the dots between different things in their lives or in their business. And then you've got somebody coming in who's purely transactional, who's just like, okay, here's your widget, right? Because that person is not going to further your mission. They're not going to reflect your brand. So the selection of people is important in that they be the kind of people who do have that in them, who have that innate ability to express in a way the brand that you want expressed. But when it comes to the how do you do it part, the mechanical part, if somebody's got the education, got the experience to do the job, and they do something a little bit different from you, does it matter? If it's still fulfilling the need, they're doing it in a way that makes sense, even if it's not the way you do it. And at the end, your customer is happy and the brand is satisfied.
Yeah, well said. And that's the point right there that, business owners that own businesses, if they're the 90%, everything goes through them, they're the choke point in an organization, they don't own a business, they own a job.
Right.
Exactly what you were saying. One, retention of employees. You're going to lose your top talent. They're going to leave. There's no
Oh, for sure.
right? The two reasons people leave is one, poor leadership. The second is there's no opportunity there. The culture, right, of the org.
Yeah.
I think what you just said, speaks perfectly to both of those. So I want to change gears here a little bit. And, you've had such a fascinating journey, as we've already learned so much about you, working in the legal field and then becoming an expert in what you call the art of bending time, right? So for our listeners who often feel like they're running out of the day, there's not enough time in the day, there's not enough hours in the day. What was the turning point, when you realized that time management wasn't the problem, actually, and what shift did you take?
It was purely by accident. And people say, what was the turning point? And what the turning point was, I don't wish on any of your audience, which is that I got sick.
Wow.
So I had gone through this period of burnout that was really intense, where like I described to you, I felt withdrawn. I felt very resentful, angry, negative, hated my job, hated my career, thought I'd make the wrong choices. But yet at the same time, didn't really know what I would do differently, didn't know what to do other than be a lawyer. And I had clients depending on me, and I had an office to pay rent on and all that stuff. So I continued. I did the things I knew how to cope, which at the time were exercise. If I felt like anything that I felt like wasn't working in my life, my go-to has always been exercise more, get a little healthier, try to, pull back a little bit, give myself a weekend off here and there, that kind of thing. But, maybe take a trip so I feel like I'm getting something that I want. So I started doing some of that, and in a year, I lost about 35 pounds. I was at my high school weight. I was doing really great. And this is kind of step one of the change. In the course of the I want to lose weight and get back in shape thing, I became a Beachbody coach. And for some people know this, the P90X, that organization has a multi-level marketing function, or did. They got rid of that last year, which I think is a tragedy. But they gave coaches a 25% discount on the shakes and the supplements and all that. And so I signed up to be a coach, which I figured I'm just going to get a discount. And what I discovered was a tribe of really cool people and a lot of personal development, which I had not been exposed to before. So they gave us access to Success Magazine, and they had speakers at their annual conference who were, people like Brendan Burchard. There's a book called The Happiness Advantage. The author of that book spoke one year. Rachel Hollis spoke one year. And I started learning about these things, which as a lawyer, we weren't exposed to this stuff. It was all a bunch of woo-woo, self-help, weirdo, like who does that, right? And so I learned from that. And I thought I was doing great. I was getting to a point, it's like, okay, things are good. I'm feeling good. I'm at my high school weight. I'm looking better than I have since I was 25, all that. And then I go to the doctor a year later for a UTI, and he gives me a blood test, just says, hey, you haven't had a checkup. Let's do a blood panel just to make sure everything's cool. I get my antibiotic. I go away. A few days later, I get a phone call, and it's my doctor saying, I'd like for you to come in to talk to me about your blood results. Mm-hmm. Not a good sign, right? Like, you're kind of like, oh my God, do I have cancer? And he wouldn't talk to me about it until I got there. And I'm like, great. So I go there, I meet with him about my blood results, and I find out that I have elevated enzymes and I didn't tell you, the Beachbody stuff was started by a hospital visit where I thought I had appendicitis. They sent me away thinking I had gallstones, and I went, that's a lifestyle thing. I can fix that with getting back in shape. So I did that. So now we're a year later, and my doctor says, well, since I'm your primary doctor, they sent me these records about this hospital visit last year. I hadn't even talked to him about that. And he says, the reason they thought you might have gallstones was there was this pattern of elevated liver enzymes. And all of those enzymes are now twice as high as they were a year ago. And they were very high. They were like, one of them was at this point, about triple normal. And the other two were about double the top end, triple the top end of normal. And so at that point, he sent me to a specialist, and long story short, the end result was I was diagnosed with this liver disease called primary biliary cholangitis, PBC. At the time when I did research, 8 out of 100,000 people get this disease. Thank you. It was the greatest gift I've ever had because it forced me to get really scared, to do a ton of medical research, to go to a health coaching school to learn about how to address autoimmunity from a holistic perspective, and then to apply a lot of those things into my life. And so I did that. And at the time, it wasn't about burnout. It was about, I don't want to die in 10 years. I don't want to transplant in 10 years, which was some of the stuff the internet was telling me was possible if this didn't get turned around. So I did that. And I came out of it like within a few years after that, I'd say 2017 or so. And this diagnosis was in 2015. About 2017, 2018, I started realizing I feel good about my job. I'm happier than I've been in years. I feel physically better than I have since I was in my early 20s.
Awesome.
I had all kinds of things that I attributed to it's just normal, or it's stress, or, I lived with a giant bottle of Advil in my house because I was constantly having headaches. I'd come home from work with a headache, or I'd have joint pain and my fingers had hurt, that kind of thing. And I just never really recognized that what it really was chronic inflammation. And it was coming from this awful lifestyle I was living that I didn't even realize how bad it was. I probably had a 20-year period where I didn't drink anything but coffee or Diet Coke. And how many of us are like that, right? We get up in the morning, we have our cup of coffee, we have the coffee in a rush as we go to the car, or we stop at a coffee shop on the way to the office, and we bring with us to the office from that coffee shop some flour-laden junk that might be even sold to us as healthy. And we're eating it, and we're literally creating inflammation in our bodies, and now they're saying even in our brains as we do this, right? And over the many, many years, that has an impact on you. So when I made these changes that were helping me physically, they were also making this huge difference in how I felt. And there were mindset shift things that happened too. One thing I learned from the health coaching school was that a lot of these things that are, it's physical to a degree, but it's also about how optimistic are you versus negative? How much of a growth mindset do you have versus a fixed mindset? And meaning, do you think that you're successful because you're smart, so to speak, like that's a characteristic of you? And then if you fail, you feel stupid and you feel like a failure, versus you can step back and look at that challenge and go, okay, something went wrong here. Here's the components of it. What can I change to make it better?
Yeah. Yeah. So real quick, I want you, because I'm already thinking here about excuses.
Yeah.
I want our listeners to be proactive. I don't want them to get a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis, and then have to be reactive to change, their behaviors and their mindset. And one of the things that you brought out, was this fluff. And I think a lot of what you just talked about as far as in mindset gets, bucketed into this fluff kind of bucket to where
Right.
doesn't matter. What would you tell the listener? Talk directly to them and tell them not just how they can prevent it, but what they need to do before they get there.
Well, it's funny because I think a lot of us who are achievers are taught to have a fixed mindset. Because when you're an achiever, when you're a hard worker, when you're somebody who goes to school and works for the straight A's, works for the academic accolades, you have people around you. And I know that now in schools, some school systems are teaching parents to be different about this. But there's too much of the you're special because you're smart stuff. And when you're trained that way, when you're taught that, it's really easy to fall into that trap of feeling like I'm special because I'm smart, but if I don't do perfectly well, I'm no longer special and I'm not worthy of love, of success, of being important in my life, right? And it's sad, but it happens to a lot of people. And at the same time, you're being taught you're special because you're smart and yada, yada, you're a lot of times being put into a track. And that track, and the flip side to that is, ironically, if you don't get the great grades, somehow you're not worthy of X, Y, Z. I mean, it can hurt people in both directions. Ironically, in my family, I was treated as the smart one and my sister was treated as the pretty one. That meant I felt like I was ugly and my sister felt like she was stupid. And the great irony of that really was that I got put into the track of, you have good grades, then you go to college, then you go to graduate school and you become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, architect, something that requires you to be smart, right? And my sister got to be an artist. And, what's really great about that is my sister is really, really smart. She's actually way smarter than me if you were to measure, intelligence. She is a food stylist and she's one of the most successful food stylists in Chicago, which has tons and tons of advertising industry. And, she was able to do that because she was not put into that box the way I was. I ended up in the box I thought I should be in and then ended up kind of like being an underachiever in that box because I wasn't happy in that box.
Yeah.
So, one of the things is getting clarity, and this is so important, getting that clarity about who you are, what lights you up, and fighting to keep that. Making sure you get those things in your life.